Hey everybody, it's Mike from the Mike Wagner Show, powered by Sonic Web Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Me and Molson's Yet Missing, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Me and Molson's Yet, double the suspense, double the fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by Sweet Psalms by Serena Wagner, based on the life of David, including 30 exquisite paintings and King David Psalms. Check out the Sweet Psalms by Serena Wagner on Amazon, keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Also brought by Sensei Swing, Eric Diamond, with his latest All of Me, new music coming soon to your favorite platform near you, eric.music.com. Make sure you check it out today. We're here with a terrific lady who's an San Diego native author, now living in Kansas City, lived in 4 continents, traveled through many countries, 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and lives in KC. She graduated from Utah State with a bachelor's in theater and also choral music education, pursued graduate work in English at University of Southern Utah, and also law school at the University of Utah, published as a playwright and also a descendant of Judith and Baldwin. Find more about that. Has a new book telling the true story of a powerful knight of a runaway queen who joined forces of a powerful knight, a runaway queen, joined forces defying the corrupt empire, set in 856. And we'll find out what happened at that time, blending history, adventures in a life, a narrative, courage, resilience, and a rebellion. The book called Girl of Many Crowns. Live, ladies and gentlemen, plus dudes in beautiful downtown Kansas City. The amazing author who's lived in 4 continents, traveled many countries. The book is called The Girl of Many Crowns. Ladies and gentlemen, multi-talented Deborah Morris. Deborah, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Well, it's great to have you on board, Deborah. So you're a San Diego native, now living in Kansas City, lived in 4 continents, traveled through many countries, 4 children, 11 grandchildren, lives in KC. You graduated from Utah State with a bachelor's in theater, choral music education, pursued graduate work in English at Southern Utah, and later pursued law at the University of Utah. Published playwright, a descendant of Judith and Baldwin, and basically discovering the intriguing story while on a genealogy project. And you have a new book telling the true story of a powerful knight set in runaway queen joining forces to defy a corrupt empire set in 856. And the book is called The Girl of Many Crowns. Before getting all that, Deborah, tell us how I first got started.
What's that?
Yeah, tell us how you first got started.
Okay. How I found, sorry,
That's okay.
how I discovered the story was during a genealogy project, and my aunt was the family genealogist,
Okay.
and she wanted my husband and me to take over and be the genealogists of the family because none of her children were interested. And so she gave me a big chart for and a book for our wedding. This was a while ago.
Oh, nice.
And in that chart, there was 1 or 2 lines that went back to royalty. And one of those looked a little strange to me because a young princess appears in France, then she appears as the queen of in England twice
Oh,
at the
wow.
age 12 and at the age 14. And then all of a sudden she appears as the Countess of Flanders, which the founding couple of Belgium. And I thought there's something wrong here. She can't be 4 places, and this can't be the same person.
Hmm.
So I started doing the research to rectify the mistake that was in my genealogy. Instead, I discovered the most amazing, fantastic story that sounds like a fairy tale, but it really isn't. And
Hmm.
so the more research I did, the more fascinated I was. I wanted to write the story initially just for our family members so they would know. And it turned into a much bigger project than that.
Oh, wow. Hmm. That's interesting because I was looking at Judith and Baldwin as ascendants, and of course, the first thing was is that were they brother and sister? Were they husband and wife? Were they lovers, or was it just somehow they just came together, or is it like distant cousins or anything like that?
Well, Baldwin was a knight who was the companion of Judith's younger brother, Louis the Stammerer.
Hmm.
And Judith is the first princess of France. Her father, Charles the Bald, is the grandson of Charlemagne.
Hmm.
And he arranges a marriage for Judith when she's 12 years old to the aging king of Wessex, who is now widowed.
Hmm.
And within 2 years, actually less than that, within a year and a half, she becomes his widow.
Hmm.
And then her father arranges another marriage for her. At the age of 14, sorry, she is married to the next king of Wessex, who happens to be her former son-in-law, who is 10 years older than her. So she marries him. It's not a good marriage. A year and a half later, he dies.
Oh, wow.
So now she's twice widowed by the time she's 15. And she decides to come back to France on her own and tells her father, no, I will not marry again. She already knows Baldwin because he is a companion of her brother. She knows him from then, but they reconnect and sparks fly. And so um, they, her father says, oh, yes, you will marry again, and you'll marry whoever I tell you to. And she says,
Oh.
no, I'm not going to. So he imprisons her in one of his castles and says, you will never leave until you agree to marry again. And Judith, at that point, decides, yeah, fine, I'll be in prison for the rest of my life then. Baldwin assists her, and her brother assist her in escaping. And then a chase ensues across Europe. And eventually, they become the founding couple of Belgium.
Okay. So
So
Judith and
he becomes her
Baldwin.
third husband.
Okay. So they're descendants of Belgium. Were like the first residents, or they created Belgium, or how was that to be? They talk about descendants of Belgium. Was like they came together as like the Pilgrims or anything like that?
Well, Belgium wasn't created as a country per se with that name for several more hundred years, hundreds of years, but they are considered by Belgium to be their founding couple. What they did was they um, were on the border protecting a city named Bruges. I don't know if you've heard of Bruges. It's absolutely lovely city, just beautiful. And they were responsible for rebuilding that and then defending Flanders, which became Belgium, Flanders from the Vikings. And
Ah.
there's all kinds of lore and stories um, surrounding that couple. And Belgium, even today, the King of Belgium has the name Baldwin.
Okay.
1,200 years later, they've had a series of Baldwins.
Okay. Now, by that time, with Baldwin being a knight back in France and everything, does Baldwin, being in Belgium, still carry a title of a knight, or has he been elevated to a king, or is it just like they said, pretty much start over and they said, you're a descendant, you're king, and everything like that?
Now, Baldwin becomes a count, and Flanders is an area of Francia still. So he is under King Charles, Judith's father, and they go up to the border, they reconcile with the king, and they go up to the border. They rebuild Bruges, which had been totally destroyed by the Vikings, and they make it a beautiful city. They build a castle or a big fortress, and he becomes the Count of Flanders, and she gives up her crowns and becomes the Countess of Flanders.
Oh wow. Okay. So now with the count being the countess, where is that rank like with king and queen and prince and princess when it comes to that in Belgium?
It's part of the nobility, but it is a step down for
Oh,
Judith. Definitely a step down from queen. It as princess, becoming queen and the first anointed queen in England. She was definitely taking a step up,
okay.
but she gave it all up for love. And they had 5 children. And I know this sounds like spoilers, but anybody can, because they are historic figures, anyone can look up any of their stats on their lives. So for me, the most important thing was making this as realistic and as true to life as possible. I found some wonderful annals that were written by the monks in the 9th century. Every year, they would write a synopsis of what happened that year. And so that was my basis for the book. I took 7 years of their lives and I wrote year by year what happened. Everything from the wars that occurred, the assassination plots, the Viking attacks. There's a lot of that going on because that's what the monks wrote about. And so it's very interesting to me that the monks rarely wrote about women. So we don't have a lot of information about a lot of women in the 9th century because the monks were monks and they were writing about what they felt was important. If a woman did something outrageous or out of the norm, then she might make it into the annals. And of course, Judith did, because her defying her father and her becoming the first anointed queen in England, because at that point, Wessex, which was one of the main areas of England, England wasn't completely united then, they didn't have queens. The wife of the king was the wife of the king, but she didn't have any special authority or anything else. So all the events in the book are basically the ones the monks wrote about, and I just brought them to life,
Okay.
including the laws that they passed. These were the actual laws that they passed in that year.
Hmm.
Um, if there was a famine or a plague or something, I put that in there.
Okay, something, I think that's a great topic to talk about, the laws that happen today in Belgium and comparing to France, Finlandia, and just about everything else. We'll talk more about that with Deborah D.H. Morris with the Girl of Many Crowns. But first, listen to the Mike Wagner Show, the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by SoundWeb Studios. Visit online at SoundWebStudios.com for all your needs. Look at a professional website without breaking your budget. Sonic Web Studios is the answer. Sonic Web Studios offers fast, affordable custom web designs that blow the competition away. Call today, 1-800-303-3960. That's 1-800-303-3960. Or email to support@sonicwebstudios.com. Mention the Mike Wagner Show. Get 20% off your first project. Sonic Web Studios. Take your image to the next level. Also, time to give official shout out to our official sponsor, the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author Mia Molson-Zia. If you love fast-paced mysteries, you love Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing is fast-paced and intriguing with an unforgettable twist. It takes place in 4 countries, 2 strangers, 1 target, where truth is illusion and those who love you to first go missing. It's available on Amazon and paperback and ebook. Missing by Mia Molson-Zia has gone great reviews. An Eva Levin endorsed by Howard celebrities, including Joanna Cassie, Forrest Riley, and many others. So grab your copy today for It Goes Missing by Mia Molson-Zia, available on Amazon. Coming soon, Missing 2 by Mia Molson-Zia, double the suspense, double the fun. Check it out on Amazon. Also brought to you by the Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David, including 30 exquisite paintings in King David Psalms. The Sweet Psalmist gives a new perspective of David through Psalms he wrote in his time as a shepherd where it started and complicate your turbulent relationship with King Saul. It's a story of love, betrayal, repentance, hope, and more. Check out the Sweet Psalmist by Serena Wagner on Amazon. Keyword Sweet Psalmist Serena Wagner. Also brought to you by Sensei Swing, Eric Diamond with his latest release, All of Me, featuring the title track, I've Got a New Heartache, Bring Me Sunshine, Strike a Match, and more. Eric's a multi-award winning artist, including inducted in numerous Hall of Fames, Entertainer, Album of the Year, will be releasing a new CD soon. Check out the amazing Eric Diamond at ericdiamondmusic.com. Follow on Facebook, YouTube, and all music platforms worldwide. And also, the Mike Wagner Show can be heard on 40 podcast platforms. Heard in 100 countries. Take us with you on any mobile device. For great gift ideas, go to Amazon.com. Check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast. T-shirts, pop sockets, throw pillows, tote bags, hoodies. Makes great gifts 24/7. Go to Amazon.com. Be sure to check out the Mike Wagner Show podcast for more great gift ideas. Go to Amazon.com/me and Molson for great books, merchandise, and more. Also, check out the Mike Wagner Show on Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, iHeart, Apple, and more. And support us on Anchor FM, PayPal, and the MikeWintersShow.com. We're here with the amazing author and lived in 4 continents, traveled through many countries, and doing a little journey herself. Deborah Morris of the Girl in Maine Crowns here on the Mike Wagner Show. Before we get back to the book, especially some of the laws concern we were talked about, you traveled through many countries. So give us your journey going from San Diego, 4 continents, many countries, and into Kansas City.
Well, I've lived in Egypt. I've lived in Europe for 12 years.
Okay.
And I lived in Japan for a year.
Oh,
So
nice. Okay.
so that plus our own continent makes 4 continents. We've Of course, when we were living abroad, my husband was in the military, so
Ah, I see. Okay.
that took us to a lot of different places. Loved traveling through Europe. Going to Europe is like stepping back hundreds of years, but going and living in Egypt was like stepping back thousands of years at times. It was a very different experience. Loved both, uh, and traveled through several places in the Middle East and around the Mediterranean and Canada. I lived in Canada for a year, and so I mean, just a variety of places. Traveled through Mexico as a native San Diegan, very close to neighbor to Mexico.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
Yeah. I could see that. And of all the countries and places you've been in, which is your most favorite and why? Just off the top of your head.
oh, that's hard to say. I found that every country is fascinating to me and has its own beauty. It's amazing. Of course, my heart is probably in Germany and Austria because we spent the most time there.
Okay.
And everything looks like it should be on a postcard and probably is somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And it certainly indeed as well too. And you talked about with Judith and Baldwin being the first descendants of Belgium, and tell us about Belgium and if you've been through it, visited, and everything like that. And how does Belgium today, compared back to Belgium back in the day, according to the book?
Well, for me, um, Europe is just very small. So it doesn't take very long to get anywhere. When you're living in Europe, you're 3 hours to Paris, 3 hours to Belgium, 3 hours to Holland, go the other direction. You're, maybe 4 hours to Prague, or an hour and a half from Basel, Switzerland, or Venice. I mean, it doesn't take long at all to get anywhere. Belgium, I found very stately as far as the Brussels went. Uh, Beautiful buildings. Bruges, which appears in the book and was the beginning of the story and the end of the story is small in
Hmm.
comparison. In a way, it felt like it was the Venice of northern Europe, just because there's canals everywhere and flowers everywhere and chocolate
You're
and
making me
all those
hungry already.
wonderful things. And the architecture is so quaint and beautiful. My heart, I just fell in love with Bruges and with Venice, but for different reasons.
Hmm. And
But
certainly as well,
yeah,
you
go
certainly
ahead.
talked about Belgium as well, too. Having all these laws and everything like that. And what are some of the laws they had back in the day, which we found rather unusual? Was it the ninth century or something like that? What are some of the laws they had in Belgium?
Well, Belgium wasn't a country yet. So this was France, Francia, the beginning of this is the birth of France.
Okay.
This is the birth of Germany. And they're fighting. These brothers, king brothers, are fighting over Charlemagne's empire. And they're each trying to hold on to their little piece, and some are trying to take pieces of others. So it's a very volatile time. And there's a lot of Vikings coming in. So um, the laws that, and every year, the King of France or Francia holds an assembly with all of his nobles and all of his abbots and archbishops, and they come and pay tribute to him. So this is how they finance his kingdom. And he presents all the new laws each year as to for their approval.
Okay.
And so each year that we cover the assembly, there's a couple of assemblies that we cover. Um, those laws that we cover are actual laws that occurred that year that they presented. And sometimes it would, the one assembly towards the end of the book, um, instead of being just a meet and greet and talk and have the vote, they actually get out and build a bridge
Hmm.
over, they join together, everybody has to bring material, and they build a bridge so that they will know how to build a bridge over their rivers, because that is where they are most vulnerable to the Viking attacks. And if they can build a bridge that's low enough over that their barges can pass under, but the Viking ships cannot because they have the high ends.
Right. I was just more
Then they
thinking
can
about that.
stop them.
Right. They seem to be like, somehow born architects when it came to that. They pretty much figured out, cargo ships, regular ships. And of course, the Viking is, really tall. They seemed pretty versed in architecture.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've been up to Oslo. I've seen the Viking museums. They're fascinating. Um, and they were the seamen of that day, and they could pretty much go anywhere, but they did not fight well from horseback. And that was the main advantage that the armies of the king had,
Hmm.
because the newest war strategy was stirrups. They had just invented stirrups. And all of a sudden, that changed everything. You didn't have to get off your horse to fight. You could push off those stirrups, rise up with your sword, and attack. And the Vikings didn't have an answer to that for a while.
Hmm. It sounds to me, if I'm right and correct me if I'm wrong, the Vikings didn't pure experience to be on horses, didn't have horses. If there was a horse, they didn't know what to do.
They used horses for food sometimes, and they used horses as pack animals, and they some of them could ride, but it was not common. They used their boats for transportation. They went up and down the rivers and along the coasts. And because the way they were built, you really didn't have room to put horses in there. So it wasn't part of their culture at the time this book takes place.
Hmm. And that's
And they
a,
were just
so,
starting to react and think, oh, we better learn this
uh-huh.
because if we don't, we're in trouble.
Hmm. And you talk about some of the laws they had. You're required to bring materials to help build the bridge to ward off the Vikings. That's one of the laws. How about some of the other laws that they passed that you found fascinating or sometimes unusual or game changing?
Well, they passed laws changing the roles that some of their emissaries had. So now all of a sudden, instead of just going and counting people, they would have responsibility to go and um, call people up to war and things like that. And there's probably it's not a major part of the book, but just an interesting side note that the things mentioned in there are the actual laws that
Okay.
were passed that year rather than just made up.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, being accurate, historically accurate, is very important. You want the story to be gripping. You want the story to engage your readers, but you also, for me, because these are ancestors, I wanted it to be as accurate as possible as well.
Hmm. You also talked about cover the war, cover the politics, travel, and everything else. There's also food in the ninth century, what they had at the time and what was essential, what they're lacking. And of course, there's also education. That was the most important. And what did they have at the time in the ninth century? And what was their quality of education, educational system like in the ninth century?
Well, Charlemagne was really big on education. He wanted his daughters and his sons to be literate and to be well read in the classics and to be able to speak numerous languages, to do mathematics, to do um, and to do logic, music, all of that. And he wanted that for his entire kingdom. Now, he could, his entire empire. He never succeeded in doing that, but he started it. And so he imported um, the best scholars he could find in Europe. And those happened to be from Ireland and England at the time. The odd thing is, Ireland and England then all of a sudden start to decrease in their education. And there's a Carolingian Renaissance, they call it.
What is
During the
that
time
Carolingian?
of Charlemagne's people, that's the Carolingian dynasty, there's a
Okay.
Renaissance. And the men and women are well educated, and they're trying to push that out among the commoners as well. Right now, it's mainly among the nobles, but they're trying to get that out there. If they weren't attacked so often and threatened by war and Vikings, I'm sure they would have accomplished that. Um, but it's amazing. I even one of the great scholars at that time who was tutor to King Charles's children is named John Scotus, and he was a Scotsman or
Okay.
Irishman, sorry, Irishman. And he was a great scholar. And I was able to do some research on him, found out what he taught them in philosophy, in logic, and all languages, all of this. And that's in the book as well.
Okay. Now, I was trying to catch what you said about the nobles getting the education and the hierarchy and everything else. And I was trying to clarify, and I wasn't sure, was education accessible to the commoners, or the commoners, kind of got shoved out? I was just trying to, clarify about the commoners. Did they get the same education, or did they go a different education?
Well, they would have to take the initiative. Their parents would have to make sure that they got to a church, because that's mainly where the education was going to come
Ah, church. Okay.
from the parish priest or something. And some of the commoners were not going to want to let a son or a daughter who is essential to working on the land, per se, uh, have that time to do it. So there were no public schools as we know it among the commoners, but education was available if they could seek it out. And among the nobles, they would probably send their kids also to the priest. John Scott has formed uh, a school for nobles that was
Okay.
held in the palaces. So the nobles' children, whoever was attached to the palace, automatically had access to a school. But it was more difficult for the commoner to get it. They could, but it would take initiative and desire on their part.
And of course, you talked about the priests, teaching the commoners and being like school and everything. How big or how influential was religion back in the day in the ninth century?
Huge. Oh my goodness. I can see why our country, our founding fathers made a distinction and said that there would be no state religion. Because in the book, you can see how huge that was. Religion supported and told the people to obey the king. The king, in turn, gave money and lands to the church, and then the church would also give some money and support to the king. So it was a symbiotic relationship, and they kept each other in power. And but the people really did believe in God and in their religion. Everybody was either Catholic or pagan. If you were a Viking, you were pagan. Generally, this is the time when they start getting some converts into the Catholic Church, but it's also kind of political why they joined.
Hmm.
Um, but but most everybody was Catholic. The Pope plays a big role in the book. Um, but you can see why and how state and a specific religion should not be joined so tightly together. A
Okay.
belief in God is fine, but if you say, okay, this church, so we take the Lutheran church, or just for example, or Methodist church, and we say, okay, that's our church. Germany does that actually. And it was interesting living there. They have the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church, those two. They get actual money when you pay taxes to Germany. Part of that is designated to the Catholic Church, and part is designated to the Lutheran Church. And you may not even be part of those churches, but you
Hmm.
are supporting them
Mm-hmm.
because they have that symbiotic relationship with the state.
You talk about the symbiotic relationship. What percentage of taxes go towards the state, and what portion of the taxes, go towards the church? What percentage would you say would that be about?
You mean today?
No, no, no.
They pay
Back in
for
the day, back in the day,
back
it's
in the
like what
day.
percentage? 20, 30, 40?
That that's difficult because they didn't have an actual percentage. At least 10% went to you were to pay tithe to the church, right? But at these assemblies, the king would just invite everybody to the assembly. If you were smart and you had land, you'd better show up and you'd better bring money with you. And that was your tribute for the year. And if the king felt like your land was not being productive enough or you weren't being generous enough, he might take it away from you and give it to someone else.
Hmm.
So it really was whatever the king thought that year. It was
Okay.
very random.
Oh, wow. Okay. I think that was a really interesting point too. And of course, there are some custom as well too. And there's also things that we'll cover in the book with the Girl of Many Crowns and what did they wear? How do they heal? And what else they did musical as we'll find out with Deborah Morris and Girl of Many Crowns. You listen to the Mike Wagner Show at the MikeWagnerShow.com, powered by Sonic Web Studios, brought to you by official sponsor of the Mike Wagner Show, international warring author, me, Melson, Missing, available on Amazon. Let's buy Sweet Summits by Serena Wagner, based on the life of King David. Now on 30 Exquisite Paintings, Amazon.com, keyword Sweet Summits Serena Wagner, and brought to you by Sensei Swing, Eric Diamond with the latest music, all of me, EricDiamondMusic.com. We'll be back with the meltdown Deborah Morris of the Girl of Many Crowns after this time out. We're back at Deborah Morris of the Girl of Many Crowns here on the Mike Wagner Show. We cover the love story of Judith and Baldwin and how they come all together, going back to 856. And I forgot to ask one question about there when it came to the king, royalty, everything else. We talked about, Catholicism and the church. What were Judith and Baldwin? Were they part of the Catholic Church, or was it pagan, or what side were they on?
They were both Catholic and they were very devout. Not everybody was devout, and there was different levels of devotion as there are today. Um, Judith was probably more devout than Baldwin, but they both believed. And it was very important for them to maintain their relationship in the church. And that is one of the weapons that the Archbishop Hincmar, who is the main advisor and counselor to King Charles, used to try to keep them from marrying, as he wanted to excommunicate them. In fact, he does,
Hmm.
because they escaped and married on their own. And so that becomes part of the story too,
Hmm.
how they can try to get their relationship with the church repaired.
Okay, and plus there was also many things in the 9th century. It's like especially with the clothing, the war, and everything like that. What was that like in the 9th century?
Well, they wore long robes, the women long dresses and robes. The men wore kind of a tunic, and they also wore leggings. So kind of similar in a way, pants, to the forerunner of our pants and our shirts. Um,
Thank you, France and Belgium in Europe. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
but yeah, the clothing, you will see also the women had headdresses quite often. Young girls, maybe not so much, but yes, the women did, and cloaks. We didn't have zippers, that's for sure.
Well, I think that was kind of far ahead of its time when it came to zippers and everything like that. Probably was invented, but they also had the jewelry as well too. What kind of jewelry, what was worn back in the day?
Beautiful jewelry. The emeralds were considered the gem of kings. So emeralds, diamonds, rubies, all of the same ones that we have. They would not have been polished to the extent that ours are, so they would not have been quite as shiny, but they still would have been stunning. And they did have a. It's interesting. We talk about the clothing, back to that. Judith's mother, Ermengarde, was famous for embroidery, and she
Okay.
embroidered on altar cloth, she embroidered uh, clothing, she embroidered on everything. And she was known for being one of the best embroiderers there was. So there is a scene in the book where she is helping Judith learn to embroider as well.
Okay.
And so they embellished their clothing and made it beautiful. And they had the belts that they wore, they called those girdles, but they're really just a belt, and they were probably braided. They could be of material or even leather, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There, yeah, they had boots, and there's not. So was the forerunner of a lot of the clothes that we see in period pieces today, and eventually evolved to what we wear.
Mm-hmm. And of course, lastly, too, that the ninth century had some medicine as well, too. And what were some of the medicine they had, or maybe some that's groundbreaking back in the day, especially if
Well,
Judith
the
and Baldwin
problem
got
with
sick.
the ninth century is and one of the main reasons why people died so young is if you got sick, there were no antibiotics. Those
Okay.
weren't those were not discovered until like the 1930s. And so if you got sick with something that would require an antibiotic today, you probably died.
Okay.
And so you didn't want to get sick. And so modern medicine has really extended our lifespans. And also about what they wore. This crown that's on the book,
Okay. You want to
I
bring it
don't know if
closer?
you can see it.
Okay. Let's see. Bring it a little closer. Okay.
It is not exactly accurate as to the ninth century. But the reason why I chose this crown is because it has below it a mirror image of it. And she was queen twice, she was princess all her life. And it shows the beauty of the crown, but it was also a burden. And in this book, every person who wears the crown finds it to be a burden as well as a benefit. They have power, they have beautiful places to live in. They don't have to want for food, but you will see that it's not all that we would imagine it to be. It's not all a bed of roses. It is a very challenging position to be in.
Okay.
And after and when I was younger, I used to think, oh, that would have been wonderful to have been a princess. And the more research I did, the more I thought, you know, I think I like what I am now, living where when I am now and having my freedom. Even today, some of the royal houses, like the Princess of Japan in 2001, I think it was, or 2021, I think it was, she had to come to America and leave the royal house in order to marry the man she loved because he was not of royal birth and her parents didn't want her to marry him. And you
Oh
look
my
at
goodness.
Prince Charles, King Charles now.
Mm-hmm.
He married Diana Spencer because his family chose her for him. He
Right.
really wanted to marry his current wife, who was not approved by the king and queen. So
Okay. So
it happens today.
the bottom line is arranged marriages just don't work.
Not generally. We need to, even the ones we choose don't always work. So,
Really?
but it's better, it's on you if you chose wrong.
Right, exactly it. It's just like choosing to wear a crown, not a crown, where to live, and everything else. In the meantime, where can we find the book, The Girl of Many Crowns, at?
It, of course, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, all the major um, venues, and hopefully within a month there will be an Audible version. Right now, it's in paperback and it's also in the e-version.
Okay, we're certainly looking forward to that. And how about your website?
Um, right now, if you go to newclassicspublishing.com, you will see my profile on there as an author.
Okay.
I don't have my own website.
Okay. Well, I'm at least you have to get the approval of the king and queen on that one. So we're certainly check that out. We're with the multi-talented Deborah D.H. Morris of the Girl of Many Crowns here on the Mike Wagner Show. Deborah, just a couple more things. What else can we expect from you 2025 and beyond?
Well, right now I am working on the prequel to The Girl of Many Crowns. Judith was named for her grandmother, and her grandmother married, she was the second wife of Louis the Pious, who was Charlemagne's son and heir. And in a way, their marriage is almost like a Cinderella story
Uh-huh.
because they send throughout the country when his wife dies, they send throughout the country to find all the most beautiful and talented and intelligent noble women, single women,
Okay.
to come to meet the emperor. And he selects Judith, the grandmother, from that group. Unfortunately, once she has a son, Charles, who is our young Judith's father, then Louis the Pious's grown sons are not happy because all of a sudden they have to share the kingdom with an upstart.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that starts a civil war. And grandmother Judith has to go through all kinds of things to protect her son's life and her own life.
Okay. Well, certainly look forward to that one as well, Deborah. And who do you consider biggest influence in the career?
That's a good question. I love to read. So, and I love the classics, but I love many different genres. And I would say that in some ways, and now this is going way back, but well, I loved reading historical fiction. And yeah, I would just say that all the historical fiction authors that I've read have been an influence on me. There's too many to even name. Um, yeah, I, it's interesting though. I would say that when I thought about writing about an ancestor, now my mind is going blank.
That's okay. It's okay. Take a little time, take a deep breath. It's okay.
I read a book. What was that? Oh gosh, how could I forget his name?
Hmm.
He wrote about his ancestors, and it I just was entranced by that book. He was Black, and his ancestors came from Kunta Kinte.
Oh, Alex Haley Roots, isn't that
Thank
it?
you, thank you.
When you said Kunta Kinte, I remember that. Yeah.
Yes, and
Kinte.
when I read Roots, I was a young girl at the time, and I thought, wow, what would that be like writing about an ancestor? Now, come to find out, he didn't have enough information to write, uh, a lot of detail about his ancestor, but this was what he had imagined. And it had a lot of influence on me as far as wanting to discover my ancestors and write
Okay.
about them.
When you mentioned about Alex Haley Roots, I think we watched the miniseries. I think I was in grade school at the time and had to read the book, and that was just fascinating. I'll tell you. So
You enjoyed it too, then.
yes, we did. That was amazing. I still have that in my head, and more
Me
on that as
too. Why I forgot his name, I don't know, except that I've never been great at names.
well. I suppose you okay. If you remember Judith and Baldwin, I'm sure you can remember a lot going back to the 9th century. I thought about King Louis, but that's another time. So, and what's the best advice you can give to anybody at this point?
We have a lot of heroes. We don't have to always redo the same stories and just remake, remake, remake. There are a lot of heroes in history, and there's a lot of heroes in your own ancestry
Mm-hmm.
that have fascinating stories. And if you have any desire to look them up and write about them, do so and share them with your family and share them with the world because the world needs heroes, I think.
Mm-hmm. And certainly as well, too, you don't need ancestry.com to really go into the story. And I think that's a great point as well. We're with the multi-talented Deborah D.H. Morris of the Girl of Many Crowns here on the Mike Wagner Show. Deborah, very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely amazing. Learned a lot. Looking forward to it soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We'll have you back. Again, what's your website? How do people contact you? Where can people purchase or check out your book?
Go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, any of those. There's multiple ones. Just you should be able to find it easily. And I hope you do. I hope you enjoy it. It's a challenging book because there are many kings and historical figures in there. It's an inspiring book, and it ends happily. And we need a
Ever
happy
after.
endings too.
Happily ever after, indeed. I think that's it. All we
Exactly.
need to hear. Yes. Once again, Deborah, a very big thank you for your time. You've been absolutely fantastic. Looking forward to having it soon. Keep us up to date. Keep in touch. We'll have you back. We wish all best. And Deborah, you definitely have a great future ahead of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Mike.